As we get going here, we're going to ask everyone to be respectful of our next steps here. Before we begin the Downtown Development Authority's Wednesday, June 7th meeting, we have our informational meeting. So we'll begin that now. Maura.
I'm going to ask for your patience if I have an uncontrollable coughing fit during this presentation, so I'm just warning everybody. I have my water here. Anyway, so thank you, and welcome everybody to the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority's informational meeting on June 7th, 2023. By state statute, all DDAs are required to have 2 informational meetings each year, and we do so in June and December. The work of the DDA is done by a small staff of 7 dedicated public servants who take great pride in the work they do, along with a wonderful board of directors who is responsible for policy direction and fiduciary oversight.
When I'm using the mouse, sometimes that
Oh, no, we missed a step. Okay, here we go. So the DDA is broken down into 2 systems. We run a capital investments and placemaking system, otherwise known as our TIP system, and a parking and transportation system. When you think about the work the DDA does, it really falls into 2 main categories. We take on major infrastructure projects within our downtown, and we run the City of Ann Arbor's public parking system. And I've broken down this presentation by system. Sorry for this delay.
yeah, the mouse might work.
Okay, so now I'm back to So we will start with our capital investments and placemaking system, otherwise known as TIF, as I mentioned. Yes. So all of the work that the DDA does is in sync with the City of Ann Arbor. All of our projects are in service of advancing community goals of Vision Zero, increasing the stock of affordable housing, and reaching our climate neutrality goals by 2030 through our A20 plan. And just as an example, in the last 5 years, 70% of DDA projects are in partnership with the City of Ann Arbor. So 2023 is a little bit of a reprieve for the DDA on the construction side. We are only underway with 1 major capital project this construction season, that is State Street. In most recent years, we've been juggling multiple construction projects in a single construction season. So State Street is right now in its final phase of construction. It went through an entire season last year, and we anticipate this project wrapping up right around Labor Day. This project, like most of our projects, is a partnership with the City of Ann Arbor. It will host Ann Arbor's first curbless street design. It also includes a new water main, street resurfacing, stormwater improvements, and other streetscape amenities, including a pedestrian plaza on the corner of Northview and State. So if you haven't been up there to see that, it has the Tivoli lights and the benches, just like our other plazas. The next project I want to talk about is the 4th Ave's Transit and Street Improvement Project, which is a collaboration between the City of Ann Arbor, the AAATA, the DDA, and although they're not a funding partner, the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. This project is currently in the design and engineering phase. The project area itself is on 4th Ave between William and Liberty, right adjacent to the Blake Transit Center. The goal of this project is to improve transit operations at Blake and to improve the safety and comfort for all users, particularly those who are using the transit system. The work includes widened sidewalks, transit stop shelters, a mid-block crosswalk, and if you've ever been on that block, or taken the bus, people are kind of crossing all over the place, so this is a really important safety feature. In addition to public art and other streetscape amenities, we will also be doing utility work to support the Housing Commission's upcoming project at 350 South 5th. Okay, now I'm going to try to use the The DDA also takes on about $500,000 in annual maintenance every year. And this maintenance is to the things or the elements of downtown that are really unique to our downtown. So think about things that are outside of the scope of the city's basic services. So things like the holiday lights, pavers, tree rakes, street furniture, bike hoops, irrigation systems. This picture is of work we recently did on North Main Street, where we removed the brick in the right-of-way and replaced it with concrete. And although the brick is aesthetically pleasing, I think it looks really nice, very tough to maintain, and it's also really, really slippery when it's wet. So this was kind of a safety thing. Last summer, our city administrator conducted a number of downtown listening sessions. And what rose to the top from those sessions was that the lack of public restrooms in our downtown was a concern for many people. A staff group worked together to determine that a pilot project made the most sense, and we identified a potential model, the throne, which is on the left. The thing about the throne that's really nice is it includes a monitoring system and it includes service. The picture on the right is another model. We are also looking at other models in the event that we can't meet the minimum quantity requirements of the throne. Last month, the DDA began a working group made up of the area associations downtown, members of the Commission on Disability Issues, the library, the Shelter Association, and various city staff members to come up with the project goals and to determine the criteria that we would use to measure success. At the same time, we have an engineering team exploring location options. So based on those goals and also the necessary infrastructure criteria for the unit itself is being looked at, and we anticipate having maybe a few options, but given the size of the unit, I don't think we're going to have, a ton of options within our downtown to fit this unit. We also have other studies that are currently underway. One is looking at a public art program and process. So we would like to formalize how we incorporate public art into our projects and how we can continue to support public art initiatives downtown. The other study is looking at the barricades that are used for the seasonal street closures. We are looking for options that will provide the necessary level of protection that we need with kind of a less construction style look. So that study is underway. And on the near horizon, we have two critical studies coming up. The first is the downtown circulation study. This is a collaboration with the City of Ann Arbor. And this is a comprehensive look at the function of our downtown streets. We'll be specifically exploring the restoration of two-way traffic on 5th and Division, increasing the connections to the community from our bikeway, exploring transit priority streets based on the RIDE's 2045 long-range plan, and the idea of a festival or pedestrian-only street. The intent is to provide clear infrastructure recommendations that will shape the scope, prioritization, and sequencing of capital projects to achieve the city's Vision Zero and Complete Streets objectives. The second study is an energy utility study, and this will be looking at the possibility of geothermal within our downtown. We also have money plugged into the CIP in outlying years for energy work, and this study will provide recommendations to help shape those projects. Grant opportunities. This is something rather new for us to start exploring other opportunities for bringing in funding for projects. So the first grant that we're looking at, actually the Office of Sustainability and Innovations has already applied for. It's a grid It is a Grid Resilience and Innovations Partnership Grant, otherwise known as GRIP. You may have heard people talking about this. They applied for this grant last month. I know, it's so fascinating. You guys, please start.
So much information.
Okay, so we were on the GRIP grants. I don't know if any of you have heard about this grant, but it's a really exciting opportunity. So this is a federal grant through the Department of Energy. And the DDA is actually a sub-grantee on this grant, and also we're part of the project team. So what this grant would be doing is creating and piloting supplemental renewable energy systems in our community. And there are 3 locations, one of which is downtown, which is why we're involved. The other location is the new TC1 zoning area out in State and Eisenhower, and then the Bryant community. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, we have an energy study underway, and we also have money in the CIP. So should the city get this grant, fingers crossed, we'll be able to leverage those dollars. So this is really important. The second grant opportunity we have is a revitalization and placemaking program grant, otherwise known as RAP 2.0. There was a RAP 1.0. We are working in collaboration with the Housing Commission on this grant. So they are applying for $5 million on the real estate portion, and we're applying for $1 million on the placemaking portion for 4th Ave. And together, our application looks really strong. It's due at the end of this month, so we look forward to seeing how that works out. To be patient with these slides. Reports and data collection. In the last 6 months, the DDA has published a COVID impact and recovery report, as well as a project's outcomes report. Both of these reports are on our website, a2dda.org. We are also in the process of installing permanent bike counters along our bikeway. These counters are going to allow us to do ongoing data collection on this infrastructure that we have installed. Right now, the way we do counts is we bring in a company from outside. They do measurements for a couple of days, which is great, except there are lots of variables that can impact that work. So weather, new event schedule, events, construction. So this is going to give us a way to consistently and accurately measure the use along the bikeways. And now we're going to switch gears to talk about the parking system. This is just painful, these slides. Oh boy, okay. The DDA's approach to the parking system has always been to look at it as part of a larger transportation system. We have funded the Go Pass for over 20 years, which allows for downtown employees to have free rides on the AAA bus service. We have bike parking available in all of our parking facilities, including 2 bike houses. And through our TIP projects, we have worked to make our downtown streets safer and more comfortable for all users. The parking system is in a real heavy-duty planning and analysis phase. So right now, we have 3 studies underway. We have a 20-year maintenance and restoration plan, a parking rate study, and a curbside management plan. To start with the 20-year maintenance plan, this is a comprehensive analysis of everything within our parking facility. So everything from concrete to stairs to mechanical systems. We are looking at it all. Our engineers are looking at it all. It basically sets the course and prioritizes maintenance and restoration in the facilities into the outlying years. We typically do an update of this plan every few years. This update is particularly important because the last time we did an update was in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. So the pandemic hits, we have the year of the pandemic, the 2 years of recovery, where we had to defer millions and millions of dollars in maintenance and restoration. So this update is going to take into consideration all those deferred expenses. So this is a critical plan for us to have updated right now. At the same time, we are underway with a parking rate study. The last time we did a parking rate study was 2018, and at that time we put a 5-year rate increase plan in place. The last rate increase was in July of 2022, so just last July. But the important thing to note on the parking rate increase that we last planned was that it only included metered on-street spaces and monthly parking permits. So hourly rates in our parking structure were not impacted, And those rates have stayed at $1.20 an hour since 2012. And when you think about how the cost of goods and services and labor has increased dramatically, it's something we really have to take a serious look at. At the same time that these two studies are happening, we are also underway with a curbside management study, which is going to help us better manage our demand on our curbside space. We're specifically looking at things like accessible spaces, loading zones, drop-off pickup areas, and time limits. So collectively, these three studies are really going to help guide us in managing the parking system into the future. We also continue to work on our suicide prevention fencing. We are working on those levels below the rooftop that have yet to be covered. We anticipate that work being done probably early this fall. In the last 6 months, we have also replaced all of the signage on the rooftop areas with the sign you see here on the screen, which was developed by our partners at Community Mental Health. And we've also installed additional signage on the lower levels. The parking system, of course, always takes on annual maintenance, things like seal coating, concrete removal and replacement, traffic coatings, joint sealants, paintings, just to name a few. This is a picture of the recently restriped Kleins lot, which some of you may have experienced when it was closed for a little bit. And then just a few other activities that have been happening. Events. The DDA in the last 6 months has participated in a number of events. We co-hosted a bicycle film festival, we hosted a Bike to Work Day station, and at the end of this month, we will host our 3rd safety event at the Delana Center. In project recognition, we are proud that in the last 6 months, we have received 2 awards. The Comcenter Award in Engineering for the restoration of two-way traffic on 1st and Ashley Street, and from the League of Michigan Bicyclists, their 2023 Outstanding Infrastructure Award. Thankfully, that was my last slide, and I want to thank all of you who are here and our taxing authority partners, and encourage anybody who hasn't signed up for the DDA newsletter to please do so at a2dda.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maura.
I'm not going to touch it.
I appreciate all the information and through the challenges, the technology. Really appreciate it. Thanks. All right. As we find our seats, we'll get going with our scheduled Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority meeting this Wednesday, June 7th. Thank you all for coming. Why don't we get started with a roll call? If you could step right back up.
Sure. Micah Bartelme.
Here.
Steve Brummer.
Here.
Alex Deek. Here. Milton Tahoney.
Here.
Tyler Kinley.
Here.
Jessica Leetop.
Here.
Darren McKinnon.
Present.
Mike Micklon.
Here.
Ressa Nichols. Here. Danielle Vaughn. We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Do I have a motion to approve the board meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second. Wonderful. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the approval of the board meeting agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak has 3 minutes each. I see no names currently signed up. Okay, moving ahead, reports from city boards and commissions. Mr. Honeyman. Doctor. Correct. I get that wrong too much.
I just want Dr. Honey is so great.
I'm retired, so I'm just Peter now. The Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council, which works to advise the DDA and City Council about issues and opportunities that affect downtown livability, met at City Hall and was resumed last night at 7 o'clock. DDA interim Executive Director and Communications Manager Maura Thompson provided the CAC with a preview of this presentation of the semi-annual DDA information. So we were there first. This was followed by a discussion of topics in our regular rotation. Street closings, we love them, but we're not sure about permanent street closings on Main, State, and Liberty. There's not uniform opinions about that. Parking issues, long-term vehicle storage, it seems a bad choice for scarce street side resources. The short-term parking opportunities remain a priority for some. And a lot of discussion about compassionate policing in the downtown area as we await progress in the unarmed response program.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate hearing. Executive Director report. Ms. Thompson.
Be very quick. Just two quick things. I want to let the board know that a representative from Senator Gary Peters' office reached out to the DDA, and I met with that person earlier this week. They were just interested in learning a little bit more about what the DDA does and our relationship with the city. And then this afternoon, right at 2 o'clock, Amber and I will be running out of here because we are doing a tour for a group from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. They're interested in learning about our projects, so we are taking them on a tour downtown.
Great. Nice day for it.
The Eagles coming down to do a tour of you guys?
Yeah.
You know that everyone?
I'm sorry?
They doing that to everyone, or are they just happy with the biplanes?
They reached out to us?
Yeah.
You don't get a hold of them, they get a hold of you.
You cover, can you do some matters without trying to get a hold of them?
What are you doing it to?
Showing the
All right, well, do we have any members' communications from the board?
Yeah, I'll highlight. So I've been part of the team coordinating community engagement over at 4th and Catherine, the affordable housing project that's going to be built in the next couple of years. Over the last year, my business partner, Yodit Meston-Johnson, and I have been coordinating with council of Black community members who have intergenerational ties to the neighborhood. They own businesses, their parents own businesses, they lived there, they live there now. And they've been working on developing program ideas for the public space on the first floor. So next Friday from 5:30 to 8 on the Farmers Market lot and the Catherine lot, we're going to be doing a big celebration of the last year. We'll feed you guys. We're going to talk about what the Community Leadership Council, the CLC, has done so far and invite ideas on, Peter, you mentioned compassionate policing, but also just more generally, how can we be welcoming to this housing project that's going to be a mix of artists and permanent supportive housing residents. We want to make sure that we're being the welcoming community that we know we are. So next Friday, 5:30 to 8. Sorry, it's in the middle of the summer festival, but you can come here and then go listen to some music. But there will be a DJ, artists, and a lot of cool civic stuff going on.
Great. It's Friday, June 16th,
That's right.
5 p.m.
5:30 to 8.
5:30 to 8.
That's right.
Okay.
Just a quick announcement that the Summer Festival is starting Friday, 5 p.m. At top of the park, and runs through June 25 this year. It's 6 days shorter. We have a smaller season this year, but hope everyone is there. Nightly at 5, dark on Mondays. So
Starting this Friday
starting the 9th, yeah.
at 5 p.m. Wonderful. Do you have any other DDA members' communications? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved. Support.
All right. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the approval of the May minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Wonderful. Moving ahead to subcommittee reports. Up first, Mr. Bartelme with finance.
Thank you, Tyler. I do have 2 resolutions to move forward today. The first one I will be moving is to adopt the DDA budget for fiscal year 2024. I'd like to ask for a second.
Second.
Thank you. This is, I don't have it in front of me. Usually Kelly has it on the screen for me. And my phone just died where I had it pulled up, but, oh, thank you. Fairleigh Road, it should be in all of your packets on page 14. We have submitted our capital improvement plans. We reviewed our updated 10-year plan. And we need to have a vote to approve. It's sent off to. So there are a few things that I wish to resolve. Any unspent DDA grants included in the 2023 budget may be carried over without regard to fiscal year. Resolve any unspent capital funds included in the 2023 budget may be carried forward without regard to the fiscal year. And resolve that the executive director be authorized to reallocate budgeted amounts within funds. Final resolve that the DDA board adopts the following revenue and expenditure appropriations by fund as its fiscal year 2023 budget. You guys have all seen this information in the last couple of months of board meetings in the finance, coming out of the finance committee, and Sarah's excellent presentation 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Yeah.
It was in March.
Any discussion, questions? Steve?
I have a question. The presentation that we all saw in March shows that we're going to be facing some challenges 25, 26, right? Somewhere around there, or is it a little bit later? Were those talked about at all when making the amendments, when finalizing, and if so, what are the plans?
Yeah, and I can bring Sarah up here to respond to this a little bit. You might have missed, there was a subsequent presentation after that meeting, which I believe you weren't at. It did go out as well, where Sarah did clarify kind of these expected projections. The meat of it is also that a lot of this work that we just discussed in the informational meeting about the studies and our reset is informing some of the plans going forward and how we're going to be reallocating budgets and what our position really is going to be when we're going up for renewal, things like that.
Very good.
All good?
All right.
And I'm probably gonna reach out to you and Maura with more questions. Just to, my work has been crazy, so I haven't been able to engross myself in things, and I appreciate that. But I'm happy that it's on our radar because it's an important issue.
We spent some time on it, and Sarah and team did a great job kind of clarifying where we're at, where we're going, where the rubber's meeting the road, and some of the options that are going to get clearer as these studies wrap up and we can chart the course ahead.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate your work, your team's work tomorrow.
Any further discussion? Questions, concerns? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution to adopt the DDA budget for fiscal year 2024, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Resolution passes.
Second up is a resolution to adopt an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget. I'd like to move that forward and ask for a second.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving it yourself.
This is a 2023 budget amendment, and authorizes Sarah to take the steps necessary to implement this amendment into the DDA parking fund. And this was going to be the increase in parking revenues, which was a good thing. Also increases our costs for our cost share to the city at 20%, as well as our credit card processing fees in relation to the direct relation to the increased revenue. So we do this every year. I believe we talked about this a couple of times as well. Should have known this was coming. Any questions, comments, concerns? No? Ready for a vote?
Yeah, this is the amendment we always like to have. All those in favor of the resolution to adopt an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Resolution passes.
Thanks, Tyler. The next Finance Committee meeting is Thursday, August 31 at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Affordable Housing and Economic Development Committee. This is a committee that I chair, so I'll briefly go over some of the updates we've received from our partners, starting with the Ann Arbor District Library. The Scioto Township Planning Commission approved the interior renovation plans for the library's warehouse, so that will be moving forward in that process in Scioto Township. The plan goes to the Township Board this month in June. I don't have a date, but it's either coming or just about to happen. The renovated warehouse will house office space, archives, and it will be the new materials processing location. So we're looking forward to that for the library. At the AAA TA, The work with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, the city, and the DDA continues on the 350 South 5th Avenue, the old Y-Lot project. The plans are underway to build a staffed terminal as well in downtown Ypsilanti. So that's a pretty big project they got moving ahead. Senator Debbie Dingell has pledged $7 million, and Senator Gary Peters has pledged $300K, $1,000 towards the project. It's a sizable one, and they're very, very excited about it. Further, their plans for battery/electric and hydrogen buses are moving forward with a possible implementation in 2025 or 2026. So they have that in the future down the line. From Shannon Gibb Randall, the Planning Commission, site plans for the 415 West Washington and the 121 East Catherine project were approved. The Energy Commission has expressed concerns about the 415 West Washington site due to its location in the floodway area. The city, these are all sort of separate, but the city is undertaking revising its comprehensive plan, consolidating the current 16 individual documents into one document. And finally, the Planning Commission is refining the transit corridor zoning, the TC1 zoning, so that they're hard at work there. From the DDA side, Maura provided the updates on the DDA projects, which at this point would be continuing, so I think we got a little taste of that. The next AHEAD committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 14th. However, that meeting has been canceled due to a lack of necessity and topics and things to talk about at that meeting. Moving ahead to operations, that is also mine to review. This is brief. We received some parking system updates in terms of restoration. The fiscal year 24 restoration request, the RFP, the request for proposal, was released. Staff will bring a resolution to this month's committee meeting to select a contractor and to establish a budget. So if you're able to attend the meeting, we'll be discussing that. And then regarding the fencing that we talked about, and Maura gave us a little bit of update, the below rooftop fencing work that was approved in April is expected to begin this month and be complete by the end of August. So we're getting going on that. We should see it done by the end of August, and the further fencing work will continue. The operations committee that will be discussed, we discussed for the RFP, it is occurring on June 28th, the end of this month at 11 a.m.
Quick question, maybe Jada can answer. At the end of this fencing project that's going to end up in August, what percent will we be at system-wide with below the deck? Good question.
Sure, so when this next round is done, the only level that will be unfenced for most structures, the first level, and then in some of them, depending on the design, the second level as well. But for the most part, again, depending on kind of how the structure interfaces with the sidewalk, everything above that first level will be.
Oh, great, so it would be at 100% 3 and up, and where necessary 2 and up?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. So again, next meeting for the operations committee, June 28th, 11 a.m. Alex, capital improvements.
Do you want to do operations first?
That was operations.
Oh wait, that was operations too.
I had double
You
duty
did,
back
you
and forth.
okay. Capital improvements. Thank you, Tyler.
Welcome.
All right, the committee did not meet in May due to lack of agenda items. We've had a pretty packed schedule up until then though. And so I only have a project update for State Street. Sidewalk and valley gutter concrete work is nearly complete. Contractor will begin paving the roadway next week. All underground electrical work is complete. As noted at our last meeting, paving the State and Liberty intersection is dependent on DTE electrical work, which was delayed. All levels of the city and DTE leadership, including the city administrator, Mr. Nahoney, worked to get DTE on site this week, which was greatly appreciated by staff.
Just doing my job.
Yeah. So DTE has some prep work to complete and plan to finish their work next week. If this timeline is met, major surface work should be complete by Art Fair, and the project will keep on schedule.
When is that scheduled to end?
Which,
The State Street
this,
By Labor Day.
Labor Day.
labor.
yeah, but obviously, yeah, well, but we're doing just the surfacing before.
Right, right.
And then we have to open it back up and then
Yeah.
hopefully fall.
And Amber, is that, is the city's project downstate, are we gonna be open in our section of state before the city starts their, down the hill to Granger?
My understanding is that work is already underway.
Oh, okay.
So there will be some closure overlap between the two. And our project should finish before that work is complete.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, so what's happening between Art Fair and Labor Day? What is that?
I think it's the resurfacing and the
That's
time,
okay,
but I don't
thank
think
you.
Amber. But they've
So-
done all the water main and.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, the major underground work is complete, and we're making progress on completing all of the surface concrete work, and it's been the contractor's goal to have all that done before Art Fair.
Okay.
And then we'll open the street up for Art Fair, and then after Art Fair, the construction closure takes back over, and they do the finishing work like landscaping and those sorts of things.
Okay, okay, cool, thank you.
The next capital improvement meeting is.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Tyler. The next, committee meeting is Wednesday, June 28th at 11.
June 21st, right?
Oh my gosh. June 21st. Yeah, thank you.
Next meeting for capital improvement, June 21st, 11 a.m. See you there. Moving to executive committee, back to me. Okay, we've got a little bit to discuss here. And what we're returning to is our discussion around the process for the executive director search that we are currently within. At the last meeting, we talked about how we wanted to move ahead. At this meeting, what we will be doing is listening to Sarah give a presentation that she and staff have put together for us that talks a little bit about how we went about our prior executive director search and some of the decision tree that we find ourselves in right now. This is an informational presentation. It goes through sort of all of the relevant information that we're going to use and think over as we try to then get to our next meeting where we'll make a decision on that fork in the road. The fork in the road consists of how we will go about our search. Will we utilize city HR and leverage their executive director search capabilities? Will we use another outside source, or will we make up the decision ourselves? So that brings us up to speed with where we're at. I'll hand it over to Sarah to go through her presentation.
So as Tyler touched on, content today, presentation of a debrief about the prior search process and a comparison of the three options going forward. The purpose is to inform the board, to bring particularly board members who were here for the previous search process up to speed so everyone's kind of working with the same information. To approve our process going forward, kind of see what we can learn about the process that we just completed, and consider which one of those three paths that the executive committee identified are the best for the organization.
It's terrible.
And yours is right from mine.
It's so painful.
Okay, so typically, a standard recruitment process would kick off with a vacancy that would lead into a transition period where typically we would identify the priorities of the organization and parameters of the role, do some work doing that, and then we would move into contract with the search firm. That would start the recruitment process. It would result in a hire of a new director and then onboarding would begin. So typically that process would be about 15 to 24 months, depending on whether the hire hire was an internal candidate, 15 months-ish, external candidate, 24 months, because the onboarding would be more extensive with someone unfamiliar with the organization and the community. So the DDA's process was different, it took a different form, and while most of the elements, oops, we're not up there yet. Most of the elements should look familiar here. Every phase went long, and even the transition period was 13 months. The recruitment period was twice as long as the search firm indicated that we should expect it to be. And the new hire and onboarding kind of transitioned and morphed into an evaluation period, a 6-month review, and ultimately resulted in a vacancy transition again. And we're now 6 months into that second transition period. Total span from January 2020 when this began to today is 42 months. So very
There's questions?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I don't want to mess up the
Anytime.
For the earlier pieces, like the length of search and there's one other thing you mentioned too, did you have any, like, cause of like, and is that something that you anticipate again?
So, yeah, I want to give you a little sense of kind of just the overview of that process, but that's exactly what we're going to talk about
All
here.
my questions to me.
Cause and effect. So staff found it helpful to utilize a fishbone kind of cause and effect analysis to identify impacts and prioritize efforts moving forward. The basic way that this works is you put your undesirable effect, if you will, at the head of the fish, and then you work to kind of identify the things that impacted that outcome. We also identified 2 of those impacts which seem to have the most effect on the process. Those are highlighted in yellow. So we're going to quickly move through this by category then. The external framework we'll just breeze through because there's no ability for us as an organization to affect external effects. We'll spend more of our time on the internal processes and environment where we can kind of look at what we did and the choices we made and perhaps inform our options going forward. Ooh, I moved quick that time. So that first category then is external landscape. And the items are leadership turnover at the city and the disband the DDA initiative that was presented by City Council just as we were leading into the search process of our timeline. Several candidates, several of our top candidates cited consternation about these things as their reason for pulling out of these, and that led to a second leg of search recently, and of course extended the timeline. The other external impacts, of course, are the pandemic and job market. I won't spend any time here at all except to say this was an extraordinarily difficult time to be embarking on a search of this kind. Okay, so the internal, we're going to go kind of category by category. The first one, okay, we can go old school.
Do you want to
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we should be on page 9, internal process. First one is search firm performance. So we contracted with GovHR. They were very impressive. We interviewed 3 different firms, and they were by far the most impressive firm I thought that we interviewed. But we had a host of problems with that, working with that firm from beginning to end. Vetting was one of the The first was that they were unsupportive of internal candidates. And it's our understanding by talking to HR, city HR, and research that we've done online, that's common for search firms of this nature. Internal candidates can feel disrespected. It can lead to them pulling out of the race. It can lead to them leaving employment. It's just one of the challenges of working with an external firm. And that was something that we experienced here. We did experience some of those impacts. Also, in a search, when a search firm comes in, one of the first things that they need to do is get up to speed very quickly on the organization's priorities, on the parameters of the role, right? And although we spent 13 months in that transition phase when ideally we would have done that work, we didn't do that work. 12 months of that 13 months, the previous director was here. We established a committee and we did some other work leading up to that, but the month after she left was the month that the search firm began their work. So there was just no time given to identify what those goals and priorities were. And that meant that the search firm's job was harder because we weren't clear, we weren't in sync on those things. They also did an incredibly poor job of vetting candidates. We had one candidate that made it through the top 10 who didn't have a degree, one of the requirements of the job. We had another candidate who made it through the interviews who had so many inconsistencies and exaggerations in their resume that it caused us to ask for more information. The search firm fully backed that information and it was just abysmal. So we pulled that candidate, but clearly the search firm wasn't doing their job. But if you look at, and I'll mention this meeting a couple of different times, if you look at the November 16 deliberation, when the board decided whether to extend the search again or whether to make an offer of appointment to a candidate, there was no awareness or no talk, at least at that meeting, about the issues with vetting. In fact, the vetting process, the solid vetting process was mentioned by the search firm and was mentioned by board members as a part of the comfort level to make the hire. The other thing that the search firm did a poor job of is they failed to make space for staff. And this is something in doing research that we found is noted most often as like one of the most critical things that boards do in this type of decision making. And while GovHR kind of made motions that way, they really didn't hear us and they really didn't communicate to staff effectively the importance of our input in their decision. So that was very problematic for us. So overall, our recommendations are to appropriately support internal candidates, to allow staff a more prominent role in administration of the process to manage problem points and oversee contractors as we do with other contractors, and to weigh staff input appropriately, to implement other search options such as city HR when feasible. Next page.
Thank you for having it read.
Okay, so we're on committee structure. So early days, within the first month of the previous executive director announcing her retirement, staff recommended that a committee be formed, including 2 board members and 2 staff members as a group. Our reasoning was that this would be nimble and effective, it would provide the administrative input and the fiduciary oversight needed. staff kicked to the side of the process, and board members without the administrative information abilities and without staff's knowledge of the work of the organization and of the role of director kind of informing the process itself. It also impacted our organizational health, and I think it said something, communicated something about our organizational health as well. Being that staff's role in this type of process is often cited as so critical, and we just didn't do that. And I think it very much impacted the risk level that we would make a decision that was a forfeit because of all of those factors kind of going together. And Maura's going to talk more about committee structure in a minute, so I don't want to go any farther with it than that, except to recommend that work group structure should include staff in the future, and that staff should be given a voice in the process to promote a healthy environment of equity and inclusion, and to facilitate a solid decision making. On page 11, timeline. So ideally, we would pause, as staff recommended, to do that work again of identifying our priorities and the parameters of the role. And we didn't do that, as I mentioned. An informal decision was made to push through and kind of not give space to that process. That wasn't something that the board discussed. It was a decision that was made outside of the board. So we jumped into that search, and that caused kind of the heat of the pandemic. The city was going through all that transition. In fact, the search for performance, as we noted, it kind of blended all of those impacts together and highlighted them. And the extension of the timeline actually kind of became a part of the problem itself. In that deliberation on November 16, it was mentioned multiple times that concerns about the timeline being extended, concerns about the health of the organization, those things were talked about and became a part of the deliberation process, which because we didn't have those priorities in place, that deliberation was relatively unstructured. And in a decision of this kind, some structure around guidelines, around those priorities is super helpful because it's a complicated decision. And so that's a part of what we would recommend going forward is to begin by identifying those, consider the timing, utilize staff's expertise in the process again, and structure that decision process to inform and focus that deliberation so that the things that the timeline shouldn't have as big an impact on the decision can't kind of confuse things. Page 12. Organizational misconceptions is one of the items that we recommended that we identified as being a key impact. And this one is, at a basic level, we just don't understand our roles well as an organization. And that's not surprising. Government is an opportunity, right? This is work to understand roles and keep them in mind is part of, it's just a part of what we have to do. And it's something that we've known for a while, right? We organized training on that just before the pandemic started, probably forgetting that for sure. But that became, it kind of became a part of this process too and affected it. So, in a nutshell, the role of staff is administrative to bring information to the board, right, and to inform decisions. The role of the board is fiduciary oversight, so checking what staff brings against law, against our goals, look at a policy example, staff would do the research, write the policy, bring the policy to the board, along with kind of noting decision points, how it works together with our ordinance, how it works together with law, right? And the board would then perform that fiduciary oversight, ask the questions that are needed, represent the community in checking staff's work, and then make the decision. That's kind of our normal process. In this case, when we were making a decision about an executive director, it was clear when you look at that November 16 meeting, there was a lot of conversation about setting the director up for success, that we didn't really know how to do that. Again, because we hadn't done that work before. But there was also some conversation about brainstorming and the roles, the board's administrative role. And those are staff rules, and it's natural and really common that those things get blurred a bit, and it's important for us to try to keep the lines clean. Part of that in this particular case was that staff's role is so critical because we put the time in working with the director, right? We're 40 hours a week. Working in that regard, and the board has very limited kind of contact with the director. So it's something that's part of why staff's input in this particular case is so important. That perception, so those kind of disparate interaction levels kind of really come into play, and they did in the decision. The other thing that happened during the meeting that was mentioned is this kind of a sense that the board felt that the organization was struggling a bit without a permanent director. I don't know what informed that perception, but staff's perception was very different. We felt that we were operating at probably the highest level we ever have operated at. So there was a kind of a perception gap there too, and I don't know what that means exactly, but I think it's something that we should think about. So recommendations are to prioritize educational roles, obviously. Recognize staff's administrative role to guide and inform, and reconcile any perception gaps. Okay, and that, we have one more page of routine takeaways. So considering everything that we kind of looked at here, our recommendation is the staff provide an equal role, be provided an equal role in the work group. That the board give appropriate weight and consideration to staff's recommendations and every the search. That we be mindful of potential issues in choosing an external search group and manage that thoughtfully. That we maintain appropriate organizational goals and take the time to define organizational priorities and role parameters. And prioritize treating internal candidates. There before we move into the three options discussion. Anybody has questions before we move on? It's just two more pages. So the first slide there is 14 the option timelines. So one thing that we've done here is we've assumed that the search firm option and the city HR option assume the hire of an internal candidate. The search firm option would be about 12 months to hire, and this was informed by our discussion with city HR, and that normal kind of typical process would be about 12 months. And then that would begin the priority setting and onboarding process, which would be maybe approximately 12 months. I think that's light. I think that's a minimum. My guess is that in an organization like this, in a role like this, it would really be more than 24. But at a minimum, 12 months. So overall, 24 organization would cut about 3 months off of the search process, the hiring process. And of course, the priority setting and onboarding would be the same. The direct appointment, a very short process, hiring maybe a couple of months, and priority setting about 3 months. Onboarding would be necessary.
And to be clear, when we talk about direct appointment, we're talking about promoting Laura from interim to permanent. Is that what we're talking about? Okay, thank you.
There are no other candidates internally.
Understood.
Okay, on to that next page then, with other considerations. So these are kind of organized by topically, if you will, and with the search firm, city HR, and direct appointment in columns. So one thing that we talked about was broad reach. Of course, a search firm with their connections to different organizations, they have the highest degree of broad reach. City HRs would be more moderate, and that's really not a thing at all with direct appointment. The thing I think to think about when we're talking about reach is how important that is in this particular case. I think if you're looking for a city manager, right? We don't have a lot of options for city managers that are kicking around in Ann Arbor. It's important to them. You want that broad reach because the position itself, the expertise is kind of a narrow field. With the DDA director, it's different though. The skills that are needed are more general, and we found that in the applicants that we received in this last search. So, we didn't find a bunch of DDA directors, people with experience with DDAs, applying for the job, because the skill level it's more general. So, it's not maybe as important, and I think that's just something to weigh in the decision, to go broad as it is, to consider that next line item, community partnerships, organizations, and internal culture, and the candidate's knowledge of how this organization works, how this community works, how we interact, what our relationships are with our partners. Those two things are kind of both important, but I think in this particular staff police, in this particular role, that's much more heightened than reach is. So just something for the board to consider there. So search firm, that would be either delayed or absent. It would take the 12 to 24 months for someone to come up to speed if they came from outside the community and had worked for DDA before. Not to say that they couldn't come up to speed, but it would at least be delayed. And we would have the risk that it's not something that they would be able to do very effectively. Same city HR, same effect, delayed absent. With the direct appointment, because the board has almost 2 years of experience with Laura in the position, we feel that they're under the board's ability to weigh that would be very high. Due diligence. So this is always an issue for governments, and it's something that we should consider carefully. Staff talked about this, and initially we thought, well, clearly a search firm, city HR, high due diligence, internal, that's kind of a sticking point, right? Are we doing our due diligence if we don't do another search? But because we just came out of a 42-month-long process where we did that thoroughly, not that it was perfect, but we did all the pieces that we were supposed to do. We feel that the due diligence is met with an internal appointment in this case. The next item is understands and represents organizational priorities. That relates to search firm's ability to understand us and represent us well. High risk with an external firm, that they would not get that right. Low risk with city HR because they understand our community and our organization better. And again, not applicable with New York appointment. challenging for search firms. We think that city HR, we have high confidence in city HR, staff works well with them. We feel really good about that team, so we don't feel like that would be a problem. And of course, the direct appointment would be highly supportive of the cost, about $30,000 for the search firm, no cost for the other two options. Time investment, and that relates to the search itself. Time investment, again, search firm, they're just going to close that timeline in there, right? 15 to 24 months for the search firm, 12 to 21 for city HR, and minimal time for the direct appointment. And keep in mind, that's not just time in months. There's staff time devoted to each of those. The longer that's extended, the less time we have to devote to work. And then finally, the risk of a poor fit, we feel is moderate, even with a better search firm. Low with city HR and negligible, again, because of the known factor in the HR candidate. That is my presentation. Just a couple of things to know before you start the discussion portion. We made a lot of points about decisions and such, but we want to convey that staff really does regard this board highly and appreciate every one of you and work you do. The other thing I want to just point out again is that this was very much a collaborative effort. Jada and Amber in particular had a great deal of input into this. It's not just my work, it represents all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Sarah.
sir.
Questions or comments?
That was a deeply informative presentation. I really appreciate all the work that went into it. It was well structured and really helps sort of frame our discussions here now. So just as a reminder of where we are today, there's not a decision being made today. The presentation that we just got is now fresh in our minds. Between now and hopefully a month from now, when we meet again, we would like to try to, for then, make a decision. Right now, we are open to questions about that, about the process, about the process going forward. So I want to make sure we open up the table. This is a good moment. If you have fresh in your mind any questions or comments, please use this time to do so.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but what led to the previous decision to use the external search firm, like for what are things that maybe I'm not thinking about that the previous group thought about that led them to want to use the external firm versus internal appointment or HR?
Sarah, you can answer, and I think we can also speak to this as well.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I could start.
Go right ahead.
I think there was conversation informally, very early days, when the previous director was here. And I think that, in my recollection, that was just kind of an organic decision that was made from those early conversations. Do you remember?
Yeah, we had a conversation about that, and staff felt very clearly that there was a capacity internally to manage a hiring process, and because of the kind of uncertainty of what was going on at the city, there was an uncertainty about the ability to be able to rely on a city HR process. And there was some additional uncertainty in there as well that I don't necessarily know what that was, and that's totally fine. So I think it really, my recollection of the time was that it came down to staff capacity and a desire that, and an understanding that our core competency is not HR. And bringing somebody in to help support that process would allow staff, especially like you said, that was early days of the pandemic. So allowing staff to kind of buckle down to the emergency of the moment while allowing the hire to continue.
That one correlates to my recollection, now you say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and my recollection is that it's hard to sort of transport ourselves back to that moment. But at the time within the city, there was a lot of turbulence. We had the pandemic, the city manager, there's a lot of discussion around that, around people coming in, people going out, and transitions. The external factors weighed heavily, such that when we looked at our expertise and we considered, look, right now we've got a lot on our plate, including being dictated by the pandemic. We couldn't meet in person. And so utilizing the strengths of an outside firm to be able to do those things. The other part is that they presented very well. When we,
That particular firm, yeah.
Yeah,
But like
and-
getting to the
Yeah.
search firm decision.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was if I could go back a little bit to timeline, January of 2020 is when City Administrator Howard Lazarus was dismissed from the city. March 2020 is when the pandemic began. July 2020, I believe, is when the previous director, Susan Holland, gave her notice. Fall of 2020 is when the board convened the executive committee as kind of the decision makers, and you talked a little bit about that process. And that was about the time that we started talking about how are we going to make the decision, how are we going to decide. And staff capacity was one of the guiding factors to that, given the timing. And knowing that we didn't, I don't want to overstate this, but I do want to note that if we'd had kind of stable leadership in the city administrator role at the time, that probably would have informed a slightly different decision. We would have had mature leadership and, a stable position to draw back on, and a board member. And so not having that there, the DDA, I felt, was a little bit more isolated in terms of how it made its decisions.
Okay, that's super helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
and we
you.
also had the experience that other similar organizations had used outside firms. So it didn't feel like we were sort of going out of bounds. It felt like we
No.
were sort of going.
As a board, we did not have this kind of information and these kind of options presented at the time. And it was just kind of.
Yeah. Each of these options is very reasonable.
Yeah.
And so I was just trying to understand
Sure,
better
sure,
about
sure.
how the previous group made guided this.
Sure.
Thank you.
I guess I'll offer a comment. Certainly wait until next month when we make our decision. Part of the challenge of a search is ensuring that it is a fair and equitable process for everyone that's participating. Certainly can respect if we need to do better in terms of treatment of internal candidates. I sort of came in late in the process, so I'm not really sure what all that means. But if we're going to go with a process that has the staff playing a prominent role, and that's the word that was used, at every step of the process, there's going to be questions around, is it fair and equitable? You've got a small staff, you have an internal candidate, and if the staff is seeing everything all the way along, if I'm an outside candidate, I already know that's fixed. There's no way, if I'm external, I'm going to assume the staff's gonna say, oh yeah, go with this person. It doesn't have to be true. So I'll give you an example. We're looking for a police chief right now. I have to firewall the whole department because they want Metzer. Everyone knows that. They can't be looking at all the resumes, giving input to the administrator's office on who to pick. You just can't have it that way. If that's what we're going to do, that would speak to simply making an internal appointment. But it's going to be problematic to do an external search with the internal staff who clearly supports the internal applicant, highly involved in all the sensitive discussions, having equal status with board members. It's just a problem. I'll support it if that's what the board chooses to do, but there are reasons that you have separations and searches to make sure you don't have a compromised process.
So Milton, would you say that if there was a search process, your recommendation and your experience would be to not have as much staff involvement or have a more limited role of input for staff on candidates?
There is certainly a necessary and I think mandatory role that staff must play. I think it is valid. Staff spends more time with a person than we will as board members. But if you want to encourage and even have the optics that the process is fair and open, there has to be some separations. Is it a board appointment or is it a staff appointment? It's a board appointment. So we should discuss as a board what that process looks like, so everyone is aware of it. And here's what you're trying to guard against, just like the challenge we have now. We can't have a situation where we're running a process and Chief Metzer gets to have insider's knowledge on all the moves that are made and no external chief candidate has that. Once that gets called into question, people say, well, I can't. And the reason it's so sensitive, sometimes when you apply for a job, you're risking your current job.
Yeah.
Once your employer knows, oh, okay, well, let me help you with that. We can clear out your desk right now, and then you can go do that. People are very reluctant to put themselves out there if they think it's already decided. And so how the process looks matters.
So, trying to guard against a process of a search in name only, if that's the way we choose.
And I wonder if this is very slightly to the side, but to your point of what you just said, one of the things that we committed to really early on in the process was that all points would be open and public. And there wasn't any point where, you mentioned that you risk jobs by applying. We had at least one candidate that I'm aware of back out after being designated a finalist because he didn't want his employer to find out that he was interviewing. This is a broader question, but is it possible and is it advisable to have part of the earlier process be a little bit more private to allow prospective candidates to advance further? I hesitate to say that because I was one of the loudest ones advocating for the public process, but it did cause problems.
It's simply an item that you have to wrestle with. So if we're concerned about it, meaning cities do processes where, like if you went to Florida, your name's public from the beginning because of the Sunshine Law stuff. If you go to other states, you can keep it private until you get down to your semifinalist or finalist. This is such a quasi-city government kind of organization. I'd have to find out what's doable here. We don't plan on making all the chief applicants public. We'll go with what's the field knows. Sometimes we have 50, 60 people. There's no point in putting all those in. The last thing I'll say about it is if the board feels collectively that we're going to make an internal appointment, don't go through all that process.
Right.
Just do it and live with it.
Yeah.
If we're not sure who we're going to appoint, then you need a process. But it's really frustrating to spend all that time, effort, money, and we already know where we're going.
I was almost gonna say the same thing. I feel like I'm thinking about these as either so column 3 or then choosing between column A and B. Like, if we don't have a direct appointment, if we don't think that's a viable option forward, then the problem that you talked about, like having an internal versus external candidates, isn't a problem because we've decided we need to spend the time and money to go out into the world to find somebody qualified or whatever position that we want to fill. If we decide that we want to just do option 3, that type of conflict of interest and stuff kind of goes away because we solve the problem. We're just, it's almost like the decision
The conflict of
being-
interest goes away, yeah, there, from an optics perspective, there is, the due diligence point is
Yes.
well taken, right? Like that would be, I think, the first criticism lodged from the community.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah. So I just want to leave space, Steve, you were the other person, Steve and Mike, actually, y'all were largely not there from, I think, actually entirely absent from the hiring process. So I just wanted to check in on any questions about like, what happened back then, or I don't understand, or anything like that.
Do you want to go, or?
Go ahead.
I want to just say that I support everything that Milton has said. I recently went through my team went through a hiring process where we brought in several external candidates. One of those external candidates had been previously with my team. That person went to another organization and wanted to come back. And it was clear from the get-go where everyone was already leaning. I had never worked with this person before, and I'm like, hey, we need to maintain neutrality. We have to look at this with a clear eye on who is the best candidate. Worked out that that person was the best candidate. It was pretty clear. But the preconceived notions that I received were not appropriate. They were not fair to the other candidates. I am very wary, being part of a couple other boards and doing hiring processes, I am very wary of having a large staff presence in on the hiring process, if any at all. With that being said, I'm open to a direct appointment. I think that we have a great person right now that meets our criteria with a process that had been done recently. I will go along with whatever the board decides. I think that's important to have a process that we all get behind. With what you had just said with regards to the due process, that's going to be our only issue. We have to be responsible fiduciaries of this organization. Do I know 99 or 100% that we have the best person in front of us? I don't know that. I've served on this board for only a few months, and there are other qualified individuals out there. Are they going to be better or worse? I don't know. That's just those are just my thoughts. I know they're open-ended, I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. That's what we need. I won't repeat things other people said that I generally agree with, other than I think we're in the unique situation of having a lot of experience and knowledge of just going through this. And I mean, to me, when I look at these options, if you agree with these considerations, there's a clear number one path. And so, I generally feel prepared to go. I mean, absent more discussion, prepared to go into the next meeting and have those deliberations. I think we have a lot of experience from just having gone through this. And there's a clear option that seems better than the others. So I don't have much more than that. Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion we're having. I don't want to cap it off here as if I just want to add a couple of things that stand out to me. One is, I do remember, Sarah, you talked about the comment that, as we're going through this, we're in maybe a turbulent time. The wording may not have been appropriate or correct, but what stands out to me is that for the board, especially for the leadership of the board, especially for the people that were in the hiring process from start to finish, it's a heavy weight. It takes up time. It's a time sink. And so it's not as if more was the interim that she's not doing a good job or staff's not doing their good job. It's just that you have a massive boulder that you're also holding up and trying to move down the finish line while you're doing your work. And I think that's what stood out to me. You know, we have a very competent staff, but having the weight of that hiring process for the extended period of time that we did, in addition to the process afterwards where we were working with a candidate that ended up, you know, it not being a good fit, it was a very large burden for the group. So to me, there's a worry there that that process will make us swing back and just say, let's just hire more, we can avoid that entirely. The corollary to that is that what are the opportunity costs of hiring the internal candidate is that you don't go outside, you don't see what's out there. I think what I appreciate about this conversation is that it's not hard and fast. We're discussing the options. I really appreciate you pointing out the challenges associated with the staff deeply involved in the process. I think that makes complete sense. Leaving today, we don't need to make a decision today. So I think it's worth weighing these things in our minds. I also don't want to cap us here. I do want to remind us, though, that the conversations outside of this are governed by the Open Meetings Act.
With the board discussion, staff has made it really clear that the board is welcome to talk to them in the interim.
That's where I was going.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that's good. It's just that the deliberations have to happen here for us. But yeah, that's exactly, that's the place I was going here, is questions, work with staff, ask staff, utilize their experience. Lastly, for me, is I don't want to cut anything else off. This is incredibly productive to discuss these things openly. Are there any other thoughts, questions, concerns we have at this stage?
I guess just thanks to the board members who did go through the last search, because what I might have cut myself off on is that even with the search firm and city HR options, I think we go into that in a much better, much different, more knowledgeable place than we did the last time around. And so, thanks for carrying that burden. And I think that you're right to point out, not wanting to overcorrect, but make an appropriate decision for the moment that we're in with the knowledge that we now have, and et cetera. So, thanks to you all for.
Tyler, one more thing, sorry, Richard, I just want to mention too, kind of this is kind of thing, as we go in and thinking about where we're going with this, is kind of a state of where we're at as an organization and what this next executive director is going to be taking on and leading us into and through. We've got finance situations, we've got renewals coming up, we've got impacted revenues, we've got deferred maintenance, we've got all kinds of stuff happening. So this next director is going to be somebody who we want to be around to shepherd the organization through these next headwinds. So that's the job isn't just come in and maintain status quo, it sees these challenges and kind of make sure that the organization stays healthy and continues its mission work.
You have a couple things, please.
I have some open thoughts, and I don't know that they're going to get to a resolved place. The first one that stood out to me was, I want to make sure that I'm reading it off correctly from the impacts. I can't think and read at the same time. But I understand the search for performance, unsupportive of internal candidates. And I hear what you're saying, Sarah, that, through your discussions, you've heard that this is not uncommon. But it also says in this that the internal candidate, I would just like to be a little bit more direct, that Maura felt disrespected. This is the first time that I'm seeing this and hearing that, and I'm sorry about that. That's fine.
It was all a very complicated time.
It was a very complicated time, but I just want to say that I see that, and I hear you, and I'm sorry. I also want to note that while this is a debrief, it is only a staff debrief. There was no board, there was no committee, there was not even WHR, which, you know, do we want their input or not? I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, we only heard from you, and that's important. But I also want to note that the recommendations that we hear on each of the slides and at the very end are a reflection, not of a comprehensive debrief, but of how staff thinks and feels. So I just wanted to be really specific about that. We had tension the entire time about staff's role from day one to right now. And moving forward, I wonder if whatever process we use to decide can be something that staff is comfortable with. I do take it as the board's responsibility. We've got like 3 things to do, and one of them is hire and manage the executive director. So I do take that as our responsibility, and y'all do work with this person much more than any of the rest of us ever will. So I wonder if we could spend a little bit more time on that as part of the process, you know, and you mentioned this about, you know, the organizational clarities and priorities, that it's not just a one-way communication, but that it's a two-way understanding of, you know, you tell us, we tell you, and we do maybe a better job of listening in the next round. Those were the first, I think the last thing, I don't know if I want to say that. Coming back to the fishbone, which I've never seen this framework before. This is really interesting, so thank you. Now I have a new way to think about problems.
I like it a lot.
Yes, and the little fish in the background. Yes, excellent. I appreciate your emphasis on the factors that we can control, the internal factors. I think you're exactly right. I think it's worth at least describing the external factors that have changed. So while we're still in a pandemic, we're no longer in a public health emergency, that's changed. The job market, I don't know to what extent that's changed, but I also want to call out something that is difficult to quantify, which is the Ann Arbor factor, which is that it is specifically hard to hire for municipal jobs in Ann Arbor, and I don't think we surface that often enough or well enough, or look it in the eye. We just sort of hope it's not there and then go out and hire and, you know, see what we get back. So I just want to name that, because if whatever kind of hire process that we do, including a direct appointment, if that's what we do, I would like us to understand our role in that and our role in undoing that. The Ann Arbor factor, for folks that aren't aware, is that it's hard to hire into Ann Arbor and maybe not desirable to do so. Extra kudos for the folks that come in. We really appreciate all of you.
Wolverine. You say that.
I like that you went for the
I have to
mascot.
say.
I like that you went for the mascot, not the color. I appreciate that. So again, not things that we can change, but noting what has changed and noting what we might be able to influence, to me, feels important. I think that's all that I wanted to say, all that came up for me in the communication. This is a thorough description of staff's experience of the hiring process, which I appreciate, and gives us a lot to respond to and work with.
I appreciate you going over that. I think the external factors are well described. There is an Ann Arbor factor. When I think about the internal versus external candidate discussion, one thing that stands out is, in my experience, external candidates really do well to come into a situation where there are sort of preconceived ideas about people in positions. For a lot of people in the city administrator position in Ann Arbor, I think it was very helpful to bring in an outside candidate that was new, that did not have, oh, this person belongs to this group, this person's already expressed these ideas. And as you come in and you're a fresh face, people don't have this idea, so you can establish your role. I think that's especially important in situations where we do need vision and leadership, and the challenges are about what direction are we going. The thing I'm leading to here is, just as Mike said, right now we are not in a position where new leadership and direction and vision are required. We are in a position where we know exactly what's ahead, and the strengths that somebody brings in will have a lot more to do with their understanding of where we're at and where we've been than the necessity to be a new guiding principle of a new DDA. You know, I look forward to the day when all of our problems are behind us and we can just say, what are we gonna do? You know, the world is our oyster. Right now, we are looking at a lot of change, financial issues, and I think that's where the opportunities that come from external candidates, they're fewer in the situation that we currently are in. I say that not to say that we should definitely go in a direction, but just to make sure that that's on our radar, because I do see a lot of validity in seeking outside candidates for the right moment. I think that I'm not sure we're in that moment right now.
Ability to quickly ramp and understand the challenges we currently face seem very important for like this position.
Yeah, and this is me reflecting on having spent the last 2 years carrying the boulder of searching and having conversations with staff, having conversations with the board, having conversations with GovHR, having conversations with the new ED, having conversations with people about the new ED, having conversations about moving on. It just is thing, and that is not the work of the DDA. That is the work the DDA is doing in order to do the work of the DDA.
Yeah. That's a good point. Do we even have enough votes to close the meeting?
Yeah, it's a.
You have to stay there forever.
Right.
I never leave.
Okay then.
We're gonna discuss this
Open
thing
meeting
until
for
next
another
month.
one.
Well, I think we've all given each other something to think about, so maybe just close out the executive committee section and, you know, we have a staff resource if anyone has additional questions.
I was gonna do just a brief overview. It's on the agenda of the potential change in committee structure. Did you want me to do that? It's kind of reiterating what was talked about last month, but it's up to you all.
We're already out of order.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll.
All right, we're all here.
You got it back.
Yep.
So feel free. I think we're out of quorum. We're not gonna get more in quorum. I think we're gonna get more out of quorum.
We'll bring out. Thanks, Melanie.
I will defer to those with better bylaw experience. We can approach the committee structure change via maybe email.
Sure. That's perfect.
That would be great, actually.
I will send something out.
Thanks, Mark.
So that wraps up the executive committee overview. Just a brief little tidbit there.
Good job.
The next meeting is Wednesday, July 12th. Moving ahead, new business. Seeing none, does anyone wish to make public comment? Anyone wishing to make public comment?
We actually have some public today, that's
We
fun.
do. Thanks for coming.
We do always have public.
Seeing no public comment, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I don't know how to do this.
Just wander off and pick it.
Bang the gavel,
Any
say
decision
adjourn.
you have to have a minimum of 5.
Okay.
So,
All right. Quick, y'all, before somebody leaves.
Throw the bathroom.
All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,